Hey friends, in today's video I want to talk about the Guardian games as I do every year, but this time I'm participating. Usually I think the Guardian games is a huge miss, but this time I'm not going to say it's a hit, but it's definitely not a miss. And the very simple change they made was to have progression have a PvP option. Now, it definitely wasn't implemented in a way that I like, but at least there's the option now. Back in the day, I didn't care if warlocks were better at strikes or just playing the game in general. I play all the classes. I play whatever the most fun is or the most strong classes at the time. I don't care about class identity. In PvP though, it is fun to represent a class. But in the current state of PvP balancing, I would argue that Titan is so superior compared to Warlock and Hunter that it sours the entire Guardian game's experience right now. First of all, the mode is Supremacy, a special variant of Supremacy where if you select a class, you have 5 teammates of the same class against 6 players that are of a different class. So in other words, if you play as 6 Titans, you will guarantee that you never have to match against 6 other Titans, so that makes the experience better and incentivizes you to play Titan. So right there, it just kind of falls flat. The second thing that ruins the experience is when players either try too hard to win, or even worse than that, they try to make the loss less significant by playing in a way that gives them 0 chance of winning, which leads to a frequency of people leaving the match outright when they don't feel that their chance of winning is 75% or higher. When there's any amount of pushback from the enemy team, that's too much, so they're gonna bounce. And considering the mode is for the first time in a very long time connection-based matchmaking, this happens way more often than you think if you're a top 1% or even worse, a top 0.1% player in the game. As soon as the enemy team identifies that, you're going to see half of them leave and you're not even going to be able to play. That's mostly assuming that the top 0.1% player is playing in a way with very, very hard meta and a high kill volume setup. AKA, they are truly trying their hardest to win. I have to mention the advantages of connection-based matchmaking. First of all, connections are good. My bullets register. For the first time in a long time, I can shoot at my opponent and feel confident about the next play that comes after that. I can also play with friends in a group of all different skill levels, and they're not going to have a miserable time because basically, SBMM will try to pull top 1% players into a lobby where my teammates are not even close to that in a lot of cases. So it's nice to be able to finally run off-meta setups in an environment where I can participate in the match, because if I try to run off-meta in a very heavy SBMM environment, well then I don't even get to shoot back at my opponent because I already lost the duel. In either case, I try to temper my loadout and play intensity to match what is needed to keep the game close. If I see 6 high skill opponents going for it, I stop what I'm doing, I change my class to a meta class, like let's say I'm playing Hunter and I identify we're playing a lot of Bubble Titans, I will switch to a Sunbracer Warlock right as we're flying in to guarantee that my teammates are able to play the duration of the match, because if I didn't make that swap, we're just going to get mercied. On the flip side, if I identify I'm playing a lot weaker opponents, I will take that as an opportunity to run some obscure setup in my vault that has some crazy activation condition just to try to make it happen. And a lot of times it sets my opponents up to completely clap me because I'm doing something unnecessary. So now when you take everything I just explained and combine that with the fact that there is a bounty, which you need kills in Supremacy to get, and you can complete it in the first minute of the match, you can see why people are incentivized to almost immediately leave before the game ends, because if it looks like they're not going to win, but they get their bounty done, they're going to leave and grab another bounty. But if it looks like they're going to win, they're going to stay in because they get an additional medal and maybe a Guardian game drop. So while I'm explaining this, someone is really, really, really mad right now in the comment section, telling me they're playing the world's tiniest violin when I said I wanted to play PvP against opponents who want to play against other opponents and not for an extrinsic reward. When I explain it that way, they're going to say you should play players of your own skill level, which I agree. I would love to, but I can't even accomplish that in the so-called competitive playlist right now. The SBMM, in my opinion, is a little too loose, and I wish it was wider ranks and maybe a true ranked experience so I could play players of my own skill level. But right now, it's so lopsided in the matchmaking. You will have like bronze tier players as teammates against triple plats, and it just makes zero sense. It's so hard to be invested in the game when the play experience is so drastically different from one game to the next. So in other words, the comp experience is so bad, I can't even play players of my own skill level as much as I want to. I want there to be a meaningful place to play PvP. But even in like the casual modes, people are so quick to leave that they don't even consider that I might not be playing seriously. Believe it or not, there are players out there who inherently have fun in PvP because it's interesting every time because it's a human opponent that can adapt. Every time I load up into the strike playlist, I'll cut myself off there. So anyway, you see where I'm going with this. For years, I asked for a PvP version of Guardian games for progression. Something fun like multi-team doubles, but this was a monkey's paw wish where I got the PvP mode, but I'm not exaggerating here, it is more often than not playable because of the deserters. The worst part of it all is Guardian games existing sucks population away from the other playlists that would otherwise be more interesting. So it's pretty much an L in almost all fronts, but I'm still appreciative that a Guardian games PvP mode exists in the first place, even though its first execution wasn't perfect. So if I had to recap, the fatal flaw of Guardian games is that a bounty is too easy to do and optimal to not play the entire PvP match, on top of there being no quitter penalty, and too loose of connection-based matchmaking to the point where lopsided matches add to the incentive for players to leave. And then we have the sandbox balance, which is heavily weighted towards Titans being the strongest right now. High-key, I was so excited to make videos on Guardian games talking about the optimal Warlock strategies, the optimal Hunter strategies, the optimal mixed team, etc. What to do when playing against Titans. I mean, I made a bubble breaking video the other day anyway, but all of that I completely had to abandon because if you get 6 players that know where the sprint button is, everybody just leaves. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a content creator and the viewership would be nice. I'm saying that because I have alt accounts with a crazy amount of hours on them, and I enjoy just playing the game anyway, even if it has nothing to do for content. Anyway, with the point of the video made, let's talk about the rewards this time. The Title submachine gun and the Taraxippos scout rifle. I mispronounced that just to help the algorithm. Comment below how I pronounced it correct or wrong or whatever. I really appreciate Cool Guy's review on both of the weapons and recommend that you watch both of those videos. I'll start with the Title SMG as I pull it up on the back screen now. Right now you want to go for rangefinder, and then as high range as you can get with the consistency perk in the left column. You already know what those are. But since Bungie did say something about decoupling range falloff from zoom, you might have to consider a different perk, which is what I want to talk about. I find Swashbuckler is very consistent when you play a Titan or a Freeze Warlock, so maybe consider that. Focus Fury, while it does sound great on paper, it's less impactful on close quarters weapons because of just how much can go wrong the closer you get to your opponent. So on mid and long range weapons, Focus Fury makes sense because you can play this grind game where you fish for a headshot here and there until you have the perk, then you play aggressive. Focus Fury also has this interaction where, like, for example, with transversive steps, you reload with T-steps, you're not reloading the gun itself, so you can proc Focus Fury by missing mostly. It's worth considering if you truly are gifted at aiming, but I think you might get more mileage out of the other perks, especially Repulsor Brace. This is where I think it truly is a step above if you run it with like Gear Falcon Haverg. But if somehow you're watching this video after Guardian Games has ended, it's not that big of a deal because you can always roll for Hero's Burden, and with the new SMG change in the future to aggressive frames, it'll be a lot closer to a point where you can catch up with like a Radiant build or something like that. But even then, there is the Duality Dungeon, which does give a comparable and in some cases better SMG, so honestly, you can completely skip on this because Bungie does give you a pretty close to a god roll right off the rip, and I'm super appreciative for that, and I think they should do that for every holiday since they started doing that last Halloween. Since I know I can get good Void SMGs out of season, I'm going to try to go for title rolls that are specifically unique and fun, like going for Offhand Strike with Repulsor Brace, Offhand Strike with Swashbuckler, Threat Detector with Surrounded, and so forth. There's a lot of fun rolls on it, so definitely keep more of them than not and just delete them later. And I think that's a good segue for talking about the Taraxippos. Yeah, for PvP, use the stock one. and then try to get a cascade point roll. And then the left-hand column should always be Zen Moment, especially if you're controller, and moving target. If you want a fun roll, I always think offhand strike is fun. For PvE, gut shot explosive, and then ideally you have hatchling on the same gun if possible. But definitely keep a hatchling one for strand-related builds. Oh, and one more thing about scout rifles that I'm going to start recommending on the channel. I am going for near max range on them because when I pull out a scout rifle, I am literally at the edge of the spawn in the back of the map when I use a scout. If I am ever threatened by a no time, I'm using the scout rifle wrong in my opinion. So I really do need it to pump out as much range as possible. I'm finding that the snappy builds and whatnot doesn't really matter unless you plan to like pair it with a shotgun or something and use the scout aggressively, which in its own way is a pretty high skill way to play it, but I find it's better to run double primary and have a slow ass but long range scout to be able to play off angles that people are just not expecting. Well, anyway, friends, thanks for respectfully listening to my rant about the Fatal Flaw of the Guardian games, and then also taking some recommendations for some fun future builds that I will cover on the channel. See you in the next one.